What's up? Welcome to the Challenging Disbelief podcast. I am Devin.
I'm James.
And this is episode 1. So I don't really know where we're going to go with this, but we're going to see where the Spirit takes us. We'll go from there.
Dude.
So I guess I'll start by asking you. What has the Lord been speaking to you recently?
I think it's been teaching me how to be independent in the context of like friendships and relationships in general. I think I've spent my whole life relying on people for the affection that I didn't get as a kid.
Oof. Oh, we going straight into it.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta start somewhere. And so he's been kind of challenging me with not isolating myself, but distancing myself from people and learning how to manage things on my own and not worry about always thinking about what other people think or like getting their opinions on everything and just forming my own opinions.
Bro, I feel that, bro. Because I feel like it kind of ties into what the Lord's been speaking to me like over the past month or so. I realized like my identity was tied so much to the people that I had around me and the interactions that I had with them, and also like the persona that I was trying to put off. You know what I'm saying? So like that's been really hard to kind of reconcile with, because it's kind of funny how like when you're getting sifted, like I just think back 2 years ago or so, like my life was totally different. I was in a totally different place around totally different people. And I still love all the people that I was around, but there's just like, I think that's what makes it so hard, because you can have relationships that are good. They can still be godly relationships.
For sure.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to stay around the same people all the time. So sometimes God will kind of separate you. And like you were saying, like you kind of have that distance, but it's a healthy distance. And he's kind of like, I want you alone to a certain extent. You still need to have fellowship. You still need to have community around you. But I need to remove you from this environment for a little bit so I can show you what I want to do with you.
Right.
It's kind of hard to get like away from those influences sometimes, because you don't even really recognize what it is, you know? So I feel like that's something that like the Lord has really been working on with me. And it's been this past month has just been a process, man.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know, like, I don't know what's next. I know that we're here. We're doing this podcast.
Yeah, we do.
There's a lot of new things going on. A lot of things that I kind of like put on the shelf. And I was kind of like, I was talking to my mom about this a couple days ago. Like, I think we talked about it too. That verse that it talks about count the cost, right?
Yeah. So
it's kind of like when you first start, you may not even really realize what the cost is, but it really costs everything to follow Jesus, to follow Christ. You know, you really have to you have to be willing to give everything up. But the funny thing about it is God is so good that he will take the things that you've given up and he'll repurpose it. He'll use it in a way that glorifies him.
Right.
You know, like you have to really know what the desires of your heart are. And it's hard to kind of find those sometimes, but when you're walking with him faithfully, he'll kind of show it to you. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's something that like, there was a lot of things that I just kind of assumed just weren't going to be a part of me. I'm like, okay, I had to give these things up, and I didn't really know what I would end up doing with them. You know, like, do you feel like you've kind of seen some things that you had passions about, but now you're kind of getting to actually use it?
I mean, I know the Bible says like what's important to you is also important to God. So I think in 90% of the areas of my life, I've prayed about like I have a hobby. Like if I have a hobby, I've prayed about that hobby. I mean, like, God, if this is like going to be an important part of my life, like how do I utilize it?
I need to try that.
And so I think, yeah,
kind of be winging it sometimes. Well, you'd be like, nope, not that one.
Well, I mean, if you're like given a gift or like given like some God's putting something on your heart, like he's done it for a reason, and you can like there
That's good.
Like hundreds of ways you can reach people, and like you could use whatever skill that is to reach people, and you probably wouldn't even think about it. So I've seen a lot of like stuff come and go, like hobbies that I've had that like I prayed about and really never got an answer to. And they kind of fell off, and not because God said no, but it's just because over time God was like, he was kind of pulling those things away from me, because he was like, that's not your purpose. That's not exactly what I need you for. I need you to focus on the things, like the desires that I have given you.
He's like, I may use it a little bit, but not to the extent that you want to use it.
Yeah.
So how did you get into, like right now you're doing a lot of film stuff. How did you get into that? When did you know that was something that you wanted to do?
It was really late.
Really?
Yeah, probably like, dude, it's probably like been only a year and a half. I was sitting in my grandparents' like basement bedroom, and I was watching, like, I'm a big horror fan, because I really like seeing like all the different things that they could do with it. And there are just so many different styles. I love styles. It's probably like one of my favorite things to explore is like themes and aesthetics and stuff like that. And I've always been a big fan of horror. So I was sitting downstairs and I was kind of just watching this horror video that had really recently came out. And like, I know a lot of y'all are going to be like, horror is bad and it's demonic, but it's fine.
We'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get freedom from it. Don't worry about it. So I was sitting there and I was sitting on the bed and I thought, I want to do that. And so I ended up making probably like a 2-minute long clip of like, it's hard to explain without seeing it, but it was just a clip about like mental health. I didn't say a word. Like it was like a silent short film where I didn't say anything. And then I ended up on this phrase like for a while, like it's okay to not be okay. And so I ended up sending that to the film team at the church, and I don't know why. I was like, oh man, they're really gonna love this. Because it was really weird, and it kind of had like this really dark undertone. Like I had like this grainy, like old Mickey Mouse music playing in the background of it, just to kind of give it like that horror vibe.
They're probably like, James or
yeah. That's probably what they were thinking.
You need some prayer?
But now they understand that like a lot of the things I make are either more serious or kind of have this dark undertone, because it's kind of my style. So making like really upbeat things really pushes me.
So you kind of found that style.
Yeah.
Immediately, like when you first kind of dived into it, you kind of just, you're like, this is my thing. This is what I like to do. Yeah,
because I had watched a lot of watched a lot of YouTube videos. So like personal creators, that was what really inspired me, is like independent things. And music videos, bro. I've always been super inspired by music videos. And so like NF, he's got a darker undertone. So like a lot of the music videos I make have this kind of dark undertone. So it's really hard for me to be like up there. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
But I sent it into the film team, and they were like, yo, this is really good. And I was like, all right, bet. And then they put me on the film practicum at the college.
Wow, look at God, man. Dude. Just like that. Just like that. So where do you feel like, so that was, what, you said a year and a half ago?
Yeah, probably like last summer.
That's crazy. So how do you feel like you've kind of stepped into that?
Maybe it was only a year ago then.
Only a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting to the summer now. A little less than a year. So, how do you feel like that you've really stepped into that? Where do you feel like you are now compared to then?
I think before I was making videos basically because I wanted to, and not like to help further the kingdom. Especially being at the church all the time, like every day, all day. I was still doing like personal projects, and they put me on the film team, and then I ended up working on stuff like story videos and like emotional videos and stuff that people could relate to, that were all based around Jesus. And so it kind of gave me that like a different look on how I wanted to reach people. Before, I just wanted to reach people through emotion. Like this, I want God to reach people through emotion. Does that make sense?
100%. I think it's so crazy because like a lot of times when you're in a church environment for so long, you kind of get this, everything always seems so like happy-go-lucky.
Right.
Like if you're not always
Smiling.
with a smile on your face,
bro.
then like something's wrong, you know? And there's kind of like this aesthetic that you kind of have to uphold sometimes. And I think that's like one thing that I really wanted to dive into with this podcast, is kind of digging into where that gray line is between, like there's a lot of things that people don't really talk about in church environments. You know, there's a lot of things that like, that go through a believer's head that you only really hear, most of the time you only really hear it afterwards, you know? You don't really hear it in the process of like when you're dealing with things, and when you're like, sometimes you're in a dark place. Sometimes you're like, you know, the verse, oh Lord, why have you forsaken me? You know, like sometimes you're in that place and you feel forsaken. You know what I'm saying? But like a lot of times we have to put on this smile, like, oh, you just need to have faith. You know, you just need to you know that God's going to bring you through it. And yes, that is 100% true. But sometimes, like, what is the word? Lamentation? Lament. Yeah. That's how you say it. Yeah, so, like, sometimes you're just, that's how it is, you know? So, like, that's something that I really wanted to focus on with this podcast. Like, really diving into the middle areas. Kind of being in the process, you know? Like, something for me, like my identity was so tied into so many different things that like I kind of went into this, once I got saved and once I really started stepping into what God had for me, it was kind of like, I'm like, okay, throw everything out. You know, like I laid it all at the feet of Jesus. Like everything that I was doing, all of the things that were surrounding that, I kind of just, I'm like, okay, here, like I'm counting the cost. This is it. I give it up, everything, you know? And I think that's definitely how it starts sometimes. And like, of course, we should constantly be dying to ourselves. For sure. Constantly be, you know, being willing to give up the desires that we have for the desires that God has. But it was kind of a process, like I was saying before, of getting to a point where God's like, okay, now we're going to use some of those things. And it took a while. I'm just now getting okay with some of the things surrounding it. So like, a little bit of background with me, like, you know, growing up, I loved all types of music. You know, like, I didn't really outwardly show that. Like, I'd listen to all types of music when I was alone. But, like, of course, when you're around certain people, the crowds that I was around, I'm like, they don't really listen to stuff like this. So, like, I listen to this on my own time. When I'm riding in the car, I'm going to have the windows up so nobody can hear what I'm listening to. You know what I'm saying? Sure. Like, I like all types of music. I like rap. I like indie music. I like alternative music. I like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so many different genres and stuff, and I kind of thought that I had to fit into a certain box. Right. You know what I'm saying? So, one thing that God has been showing me is, like, it's okay to be who I am. I always kind of felt like I had a whole bunch of different masks on because I was like when I'm with these people, like, I got to act this way. Like, there's a certain aesthetic that goes with these type of people. If I'm listening to this type of music, I'll be around these people, and, you know, they get it because they're those type of people, you know? Those type of people. So, like, for me, it's kind of been a process of learning how to be comfortable just being in the middle. And I've kind of realized that everybody kind of has that aspect to them. Yeah. I thought that it was kind of like everybody just fits into their own certain groups, and sometimes it looks like that, but, like, we're very complicated. Like, human beings are just very complicated, bro. There's just so many components to us. So, like, one thing that God has been showing me is, like, there's a lot of things that, like, I kind of dismissed because I felt like they would come up. I would have passions and stuff growing up. Music, fashion. like you're saying, I really like the different aesthetics of things, you know? So there's, like I just like a whole bunch of different things, and that's okay. I'm still in a struggling point right now, but I'm learning how to be okay with liking different things and being around different people, and that I don't have to fit into one specific box. Which is a hard thing because it's kind of like when you spend your whole life kind of code switching, and the fear of judgment comes from when I'm around. If this group of people that I'm usually around, if they see me acting like the people that I hang around at this time, they're gonna be like, "What's up with him? Why is he acting like that?" You know, and like then you kind of have to hide yourself from the different groups and the different types of people. So it's kind of like, which is a hard place to be in because I'm just now figuring out who I actually was underneath all of that.
Right.
So it's kind of like I went through these periods of just feeling like I needed to just switch something. I may switch my whole style up, like dress-wise, like it could be hair color, it could be haircut. Like I just impulsively get to a point where I'm like, that's enough of this. We need to switch it up. For sure. Like you need to switch to a different vibe. Like this vibe's not fitting me. Yeah. And
that's so weird because I'm the opposite. Because I have like, I don't like change. Mm-hmm. And so I'm consistent in like what I wear, what I do. Like I do the same things over and over. And I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yo, I go to McDonald's and I order the same thing every time. Right? Like I go to a restaurant and like I order the same thing every time because I don't like change. So it's interesting. Like I think that's a lot where people differ is like depending on whether you like change or you don't like change. Mm-hmm.
And too much of each of them can be
negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And some people like obsess over it. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have to find that balance, especially in Christianity. Yeah. Like God's going to tell you to move, and even if you don't want to, you're going to have to go. Yeah. And so as soon as you like are disobedient, like that's when things start to go downhill. That's when it's like, oh, he didn't listen to me. Yep. Like it's gonna be a little bit before I give you another opportunity, but it's your choice.
And it's like sometimes the decision is still right there for you to make. Right. Like a lot of times we think it's like, oh, I messed this up, it's gone. A lot of times he's gonna keep knocking over and over and over again, like, this is what I'm trying to get you to do. This is what I'm trying to get you to do. Like, This is what I want to do through you. So it's taken a while to kind of try to find that balance. You know what I'm saying? Because it's hard to find where I had to figure out who my identity was in. Because beforehand, like my identity was attached to so many things that were like external, having to do with like my connections with other people. There wasn't really anything internal that had me like, okay, this is me. Right. But there was a part of me inside that was kind of like it had kind of went dim. Like I didn't really know, I couldn't find it anymore. Because when you spend years and years and years like trying to always be somebody else, trying to always act like somebody else, or trying to fit a certain aesthetic, trying to fit into a certain group, like you just forget who was in there in the first place. So there was a lot of things that like I was passionate about that I kind of just shoved in the closet, and I was like, I'm not going to touch that anymore because maybe that's just not me. So like I talked about a little bit with like music, like I love music. I don't know what capacity I want to do something in, but like I feel like God's been showing me recently that like there is going to be a time for that, and there is going to be a certain aspect of you that is going to use that to glorify me. I don't quite know what it is, but he's been building the foundation so that anything that I do is going to glorify him. Right. And it's my intentions with the things were wrong beforehand too. So it's kind of like I gave it all to him. He's like, we're going to work on this foundation at the bottom. Right. We're going to go from here once we build this foundation, so that way I can trust that when I put you in that position to be able to do these things, you're going to do it for the right reasons. You're going to do it with the right intentions, and you're going to go in the right direction with it. So that has also been a hard process, because it's kind of like, inside you're like, there's some potential in there. Like, I know that I can do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, but why can't I figure out how to do it? Why can't I do it like this person does it? Why can't I do it? Like, you see a whole bunch of finished products and you're kind of like, that's where I need to get. So it gets very like disheartening when you're constantly looking at that and you don't really know how to get there. But that's one thing he's been showing me, like, now that I know that, like, he's proud of me no matter what. Like the verse is, I don't remember the exact verse, but it was when Jesus was getting baptized and the Spirit fell down like a dove, and the Father in heaven said, you are my Son whom I love and with whom I am well pleased. So that's been something that, like, I actually got a chance to preach on that a couple months ago.
Bet.
And like through that process of preparing for that, he kind of showed me, like, this is what I want you to remember. So even going into that was something that was nerve-wracking for me, because I was like, I've never preached before.
Right.
I've never had to go up and do something like this. So going into it, I had to first learn that that's how he viewed me. Once I recognized that that's how he viewed me, like you're my child, like I love you and I'm pleased with you. Once I knew that, like, he sees me like that, anything anybody else thinks doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's kind of like the God of the entire universe looked at me and he was like, I'm pleased with you before you even did anything. Like, that was a beautiful thing about it. Like, the Father said that to Jesus before he even started. Before he did a single thing in his ministry, he said, you are my Son whom I love and with whom I am well pleased.
Right.
Like, why would he be well pleased? Like, if he hadn't done anything yet, like, why would he be pleased? Could it be because of the things he's about to do? But no, he starts off by saying, like, you are my son. Like, that's why he's pleased. Like, just because that's his child. So that's something I've had to remember, and, like, coming from that posture versus, like, a work towards this so that God will be pleased with me, or so that other people will be pleased with me. It's a totally different process. And it helps me to be more comfortable doing things that I beforehand was kind of like, maybe that's just not me.
Right.
You know, because I had this fear of that failure, that fear of that judgment, like, from this group is going to be like, what is he doing? Like we don't do that. Like, what are you doing? You know?
Good. Keep going.
Oh, you got a verse for me?
Yeah, I did. Hold on. You're good. You keep going.
You got the scripture for me. I was seeing how long it was going to take for that script to come out.
Dude.
But it's kind of like, I don't know. There's just so many different avenues of things that I'm open to doing now, just because I know that, like, my Heavenly Father's already pleased with me. He knows that he has plans for me. He knows that what he wants to do in and through me. And I have to be comfortable with being a child of him before I go and do anything else.
For sure.
So now that I have that foundation, I kind of feel like I have permission to step forward. And another thing that was really, like, hard for me was I was always so scared of stepping on other people's toes. So scared of, like I would see other people doing something and I didn't want to really step out into doing it because I felt like that would be hard for them. Like, a part of me was being empathetic. And the way that God kind of worked through that with me was, like, with my brother, that was kind of the case growing up. Like, if y'all don't know, my brother's a youth pastor. And he got saved a couple years before I did. But growing up, I always really looked up to my older brother. And I did love to do the same things that he loved to do. And I thought that we couldn't do that. Sure. I thought that, like, it was going to be one of us or the other one. And I didn't want to ever, like, step on his toes. I didn't want to ever be like distracting any of the attention from him. So it's kind of like I would see him do things, like, he loved music. He was very, like, naturally gifted at music. Right. So knowing that, I was kind of like, I love music too, but I was like, he's already doing that. I don't want to step on his toes. And then, like, you know, he obviously came to faith before I did. And then knowing, like, the calling that God had put on my life to be in ministry, he was already in ministry. So I was kind of like, I don't know if I really want to do that because he's already doing that. Sure. Like, I don't want to get in his way or anything. And I didn't realize how that view translated to all of the other relationships that I had. So anytime I saw somebody doing something that I wanted to do, like, I just wouldn't do it because I was like, they're already doing that. That's their thing. But it's like, if you think that way about everything, everything's always going to be somebody else's thing. And you're never actually going to do anything. Yeah. So, like, I had a conversation with him where I told him that's the way that I had felt. And he was like, bro, like, you don't understand. Like I've been praying for this. You know, I've been praying for you to step into this calling that God has for you. Like, long before I was even saved, he was already praying for me. So kind of getting that anointing, like that permission, like, right, I give you permission to go the same places that I have gone. And the fact that he was even praying that I would do greater. Right. Like, that was something that broke some chains off of me. Like, I was like I didn't realize how much that was holding me back from so much, right. You know? So, like, once he gave me that permission, I was like, I've never had permission to just go before, you know? So now that I have that permission, and now that I have that correct view of the fact that God is already pleased with me, and that I am his child, and, like, he loves me, and that when I go into doing these things, like, whether I fall on my face or whether I do it very successfully, he's pleased with me because I'm being obedient to what he told me to do. Right. That's made all the difference for me. You know, so, like, now I can actually just go into it and just do it. Yeah. So, like even this podcast, like,
you can just walk into things with authority now.
Yes. Authority. Like, that's the big thing.
I think we did have this conversation about, like, one situation that,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And to, like, hear that is really great, because I remember how you felt then, and I see now, like, how you've grown in that area, and that's really great. You said you were talking about works, and you were talking about how, I believe you said, like, you felt like you had to do things in order for God
to be pleased.
To be pleased, right? And I'm just thinking, like, that there are some people in here that, like, definitely believe that. And I'm gonna be like a history nut for a second. So the Catholics still believe in, like, faith is only earned by works. But we believe that it's faith and works, because it literally says it in the Bible. Here in James it says, in James 2:18, it says, "But someone will say, 'You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without works, and I will show you faith by my works.'" And, like, dude, like, I think it also says in verse 20, like, "Are you willing to learn that faith without works is useless?" Okay, so we were doing this debate. I'm just gonna run the entire thing back. We were doing this debate in class about, like, the Catholics and the Reformers, and I was on the side of the Reformers, and so was a buddy of mine, and he said, basically what he said is that faith wasn't, like, works wasn't required for faith, but works was made for after you've already found faith, because God's not going to appoint you, like, works if you don't follow him. Which is something...
you can't please God without faith.
Yeah, you can't please God without faith. And that's something you were talking about earlier. And so I think a lot of people have it misunderstood. Like, and I'm sure I did at one point that I didn't realize it, is, like, that I didn't have to work.
I know I did.
Like, yeah, like you were saying, like, you don't have to work in order for God to love you. And what's really interesting is, what I also think is really interesting is that people who aren't saved won't be able to understand that. Because they won't be able to understand Scripture.
Oh, I got something to say about that.
And so, dude, so what's literally what you have to have faith before God can give you anything. Other than that, you're just doing it on your own free will. Yeah.
Bro. Okay, so somebody asked me this question. It's a friend of mine. He's not a Christian. He is religious, or he wants to be. He's trying to be. He identifies with a different religion. I'm not going to say specifically which one it is. But he does identify with a different religion. And one of the things that he said that he was struggling with was he has discipline in so many areas of his life. When it comes to work, when it comes to making money, all of those different things. He has discipline. Getting up early in the morning, all of those things, reading, doing all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But one thing that he said that he struggles with finding the motivation to do is do the religious things. He said that he wants to be religious. He wants to have that aspect of life because he does believe that there is a higher power. He does believe that there is a God. So one of the things that he's been struggling with is finding the motivation to. Like, he feels like every time he does it, like, he'll be adamant about it for a couple days. And then after that, it kind of just fans out and you're kind of like, I don't really feel like it. It's hard to do. So, like, there was a point where I was in that same situation when I first got saved. Because I kind of felt like, I'll do a whole testimony share later. But I was in a situation where I felt like I really, really needed to lean on God. I knew that God was real. I knew that this is something that I needed to do. But it was very difficult to actually do it because it's kind of like when you're doing the whole religious thing, you think of it as, like, for instance, music. You think like, okay, I can't listen to this type of music anymore.
Right.
I can't listen to the same type of music I was listening to before. You try to put on this Christian performance, or this religious performance. Like, I know these are things that I shouldn't be doing, so let me just try really hard, and then I'll stop doing them. I just need to be more and more disciplined.
Right.
And that's what I was trying to bring into my new walk as a Christian, not really recognizing that the central point of the entire religion is faith. It starts with faith. That's where you start at, and that's where you go from.
Right.
The faith will translate into works. Because of the faith that you have in Jesus, that is what will empower you to be able to go and do the works. And it will make it so that it is not, it's not exhausting. Because it was excruciating trying to go and do these religious things. I knew that I needed to, but having the actual power to do it, and the motivation to do it was the hard part. So I tried it for like a week straight where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to any secular music. I'm not going to read anything but the Bible. I'm not going to be on social media at all. Like, I'm going to do these things. And when I tried to do it, like, at first I was like, okay, this is a good thing. I'm doing right. Couple days in, I'm like, this is exhausting. I cannot do this for the rest of my life. And it's funny because at that same time, God started showing me, there was a sermon that Pastor Daniel had actually preached, where he was talking about the going from the tree of life versus the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and how there's different motivations for the two. And I had been, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a very legalistic mindset. Yeah. It's these are the rules, these are the good things, and these are the evil things. These are the rules that I need to uphold. This is how I know that I need to uphold this law that God has given. Right. So that's what the Pharisees did. They tried to live the same way. They were trying to live religiously, but they had no faith. And it's very difficult to live like that because you're going to burn out. You're going to keep hitting those moments where you're like, I really don't feel like it. No, don't get me wrong. There is a certain discipline that comes with all of this. But it's your starting point. You know, it's where are you going from? Just like I was saying with the verse that said, you are my son whom I love and with whom I am well pleased. Starting from a posture of, oh, I'm his son. Like, I have faith that he loves me. I have faith that he's pleased with me. I'm starting from that posture versus I need to work until I get to a point where he's pleased with me. I need to be in God's good graces. So I need to try really hard to do so. But that's the beautiful thing about Christianity, is that like you have to have a certain amount of humility to understand that I can't work that hard.
Right.
That I can't work to that point to where I will be worthy of being pleasing to God. That's why it says you can't please God without faith. It doesn't say you can't please God without works. The works will come. And, you know, faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
But that comes afterwards. So once I got a grasp of that mentality that like God already loves me, I'm living from the tree of life. Right. I'm going to live from a posture of, I know that I can't do it on my own. That's like, God knows that, and I know that now. Like, that's the whole reason why Jesus came, because we couldn't do it on our own. If we could ever be a good enough person to atone for our own sins and make the good outweigh the bad, whatever it may be, if we could ever do that, Jesus wouldn't have been necessary. And that's one of those things that you think like, I mean, I guess I'll take it here. A lot of people think that if you're a good person, you should be able to make it into whatever heaven or afterlife there is.
Right.
But you really have to ask the question, like, what makes you a good person? A lot of people say when your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds. And that sounds nice when the standard is the standard that you come up with on your own. When good and bad is subjective and not objective.
Right.
Of course you're going to have a mentality like, yeah, I could be good enough at some point. And it's not like I could see why it's an attractive mentality to have.
Right.
To want to view yourself in that manner. But at the same time, if you really, the difference between Christianity and other religions is that Jesus said himself, like when he's talking about murder, he's saying it. He basically said like, you're as good as a murderer is if you have some type of bitterness towards one of your brothers, if you have some type of bitterness towards someone else, if you look at a woman lustfully, it's as if you've already committed adultery.
Yeah.
Because it's a heart posture behind it. It's not just I didn't commit the act, and that's what's so different because the way that Christians view good and evil is not just, okay, like I did a couple volunteer projects. I did a couple serve projects. I helped some homeless people a couple times. I didn't cuss anybody out today. That means that I must be a good person. You know, there's just this standard that is not actually accurate. Like in my own particular view. And when you get this mentality of like, my definition of what is good is the real definition.
Yeah.
If everybody has their own definition, then like, is there really any good or evil?
Yeah, because then anybody could be anything.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like, but that's the thing, like we can all agree that like, there are things that are not good things. Yeah. Like I guess I could use the example of drunk driving.
Right.
Somebody that's drunk driving, somebody who's doing that act, of course to them they're going to be like, it's no big deal. But a strong majority would be like, no, you're doing something wrong. Now imagine if you go to tell that person that they're doing something wrong and they're like, who are you to tell me what's wrong and what's right?
Yeah, I'm still a good person.
I'm still a good person. I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right.
Like, if it's subjective, like, we can all agree that there's certain things that, like, so it's like, if you're going to have the mentality that you can have your own truth, you can have your own definition of what is good and what's evil.
Yeah.
You have to take it to its fullest extent, because I feel like a lot of times we don't really think it all the way through. Because if that's the mentality that everybody has, imagine what the world would look like.
Right.
Imagine if everybody fully embodied the mentality of like, whatever I do, if I think that it's good, then it's good. Anything would be okay. Nothing would be off the table. Somebody could murder someone else and be like, I did it for a good reason. I was hungry. I needed food. So I killed this person. I took their stuff. It seems extreme, but like, that's the reality of that mindset. When you have your own subjective truth, when you have your own subjective morals, that's what makes it can't be true that way, you know?
No, it can't. Because if you look biblically, all sin is equal.
Mm-hmm.
All sin. Like, whether I don't know, I lied to my mom or I killed somebody, like, all that sin looks the same to God.
Mm-hmm.
So, ultimately, like, it's not up to you what's good and what's bad. It's what the Bible says.
See, and the funny thing about it, when Christians go and talk to other people and they say these things, the response is usually, who are you to decide what rules and regulations I should have on myself? Who are you to decide what? And that's the funny thing about it. There's always this mentality, like we just came up with it ourselves. Like this is what I believe, so you need to believe it too. But the funny thing is, like, the reality of the life of a Christian, dying to yourself every day, means that you understand that there's a lot of things that you think that are opposed to the things that God thinks.
Right.
There's certain things that you already believe coming in. I don't necessarily agree with that. But you got to think about it. Like, if you only live by standards that you already agree with, if everybody did that, like, there really is no standard.
Right.
Like, nothing in you will ever change. And it's a very arrogant perspective to have, because you're viewing it as if you can do no wrong. You're always right in every situation. You know, so it's kind of like, it's not that Christians just want to force their particular views on other people. Because coming into it, there was a lot of things about Christianity I didn't agree with.
Right.
But it was the things that I did agree with, the things that I knew were true. God had revealed himself to me in a way that was so real that, like, I knew that this was true. And if that's true, there must be some truth to the other parts. I may not agree with everything that it says, but I know that what I experienced with God was real enough that I'm willing to continue to walk towards him so that he can show me what's true.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, if you can do this, like if you're this powerful to do the things that you've done, the things that I've seen you do, there must be some truth to what you're saying. And if you're pointing back to this, like, if you're pointing back to this over and over again, like, what is up with that? Like, when I got saved, like, I was in a point where I didn't necessarily agree with the whole Jesus thing, Jesus being God, all of these things. Like, I didn't understand it. I hadn't really looked fully into it for myself.
Right.
And that's the funny thing about it. Like, I was in church and I got this peace. I was just dealing with a whole bunch of anxiety. And I got this peace that was the realest thing that I had ever felt. And even in that moment, it wasn't like in my head I was like, Jesus is Lord. Like, I get it. You know what I'm saying? And that may sound controversial because it's like, you know, the part of salvation is like confessing that Jesus, and that's something that did come later. But the moment that God truly met with me, I didn't fully understand it. I didn't just automatically like, oh, everything about the Bible is true. It was like, I know what I just experienced. I didn't find that anywhere else.
Right.
So I'm going to take that and I'm going to keep looking into this. I'm going to see what's true. And the funny thing about it is, like, that's really the mentality that, like, God has put into me.
Right.
And that has been the inspiration for this podcast. That's why it's called Challenging Disbelief. Like, it's based on the verse, it's Mark 9:24. I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief.
Yeah.
And the part that's so strong about that statement is that it starts with saying, I do believe. There was something that man did believe.
Right.
There was something that he believed about Jesus. But he's also acknowledging that there's a part of him that doesn't really believe.
Yeah.
So he's saying, help me overcome my unbelief. I'm going to walk towards you. I'm going to use the faith that I have, the faith that is the size of a mustard seed. I'm going to use that. And I'm going to follow you anyway, hoping that it will grow. Not really knowing where it's going to lead me. I know that this is true, so I will stick to that and I'll keep following you. But I feel like that's where a lot of people go wrong. They're like, okay, I've experienced this and this was true, but these other things I don't agree with, so I'm going to throw it all away. And that's the funny thing about it. Like,
well, I think
God's not scared of it.
Everybody kind of has that moment.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Some people like some people prefer it's small, but then other people have like this dark night of the soul phase, which is basically like an extreme, like pull away from God, and it's kind of like a pivotal moment in your walk in faith that determines whether or not you're going to keep your faith or whether you're not going to leave it. And so it's like, it can either be super extreme or super subtle. For a lot of people, it's actually not really the extreme. Like, a lot of people just, like, I don't know, they have a disagreement with God, and they're like, all right, I don't want to do this anymore. But for some people, it's like a real battle. Well, I mean, it's all a battle, but, like, for some people, it's like life or death. Like, either this is going to work or it's going to not, and, like, you've given me a reason to think that it's not, so I quit. Like,
and that's the funny
that's
thing
extreme.
too.
Like, it's the extreme for some people.
He'll keep knocking.
Yeah, I know.
He'll be like, that's not it. That's not all I had for you. Don't give up here. Like, keep going. And there's a posture that he starts to develop. Like, faith grows.
Right.
You may start at a certain point, but the more that you walk with him, the more that you come to him with your questions. I feel like that's the hard part for a lot of people. A lot of people will take the things that they don't believe and just keep it. Right. They don't ever bring it to him, like, because I know in, like, a lot of church environments, it's kind of like frowned upon to have questions sometimes. Frowned upon to actually challenge some things. You know, like, I may not necessarily agree with this. I hear the church saying this. I don't really get that. I don't understand it. I don't agree with what they're saying. And that's what's so beautiful about the Holy Spirit, too, because the Holy Spirit will lead you into truth. The Holy Spirit will, granted, there are some questions that are, above knowledge that I could have. But I'd say, like, 99% of the time when I come to God with the things that I doubt, at some point, it may not be right there in that moment, he shows me.
Yeah.
Sure. And, like, I'm trying to remember what the verse is, but it had basically said, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open for you. And when I'm looking at that verse through a lens of like challenging the disbeliefs that I have, I know. When I look at it through that lens of like challenging the disbeliefs that I have, there has to be a posture of, okay, I don't understand this. I don't necessarily believe this. So I'm going to ask.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'll show you. Like, you'll find the answer. Like, and keep knocking at that door. Like, okay, I don't understand this, God. I'm not getting this yet.
Yeah.
Keep knocking at that door. Keep searching for the answers, but don't just stop there. Don't just throw it all away when you don't get an answer immediately.
Well, here's the thing is, like, we've created this culture of, like, you're kind of dumb if you ask questions. Like, you're, like, in high school, and you, like, have a question, but you don't want to, like, be an idiot. So you raise your hand. So you wait until after the class. Or you just gave up. And so people don't ask questions, and they just give up because they don't want to look dumb. Or they're immediately like, yo, I got to talk to your head pastor about it, and he's the only one I'll talk to. But, like, you just can't be afraid to ask those questions, because as a Christian, like, those questions are going to come, like, a lot. Like, those are going to be constants.
When you're walking by faith, there's always going to be some questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Always going to be some questions.
And honestly, there are going to be a lot of moments of doubt, too. And, like, a lot of that doubt comes from those questions not being answered, but it's because you didn't ask.
Ooh, bingo. Bingo. See, bro. Like, I really want this to be a space where people can ask questions.
Yeah, for sure.
And Holy Spirit led. We will, do our best to answer the questions. Like, something that I found is, like, I've questioned so many things, and I'm like, 9 times out of 10, when I open that word with a question, the answer is right there waiting for me. I just have to go look for it. There's a lot of things that, like, I will question, and I'll just keep moving on with those questions. I won't say anything about it, and it'll keep eating me up. And then next thing I know, I'm like, how did I get this far from God? How did I get so far away to where, like, I don't feel his presence anymore? I haven't heard him speaking to me. And it's like, he's waiting for me to come to him. He's waiting for me to come speak to him and be like, hey, like, I didn't understand this. I didn't like how this happened.
Yeah.
Like, why did this happen? I don't get it. And that's the funny thing, like, he's not afraid of our questions.
No.
Like, not at all. Like, he already knows our thoughts. That's the funny thing about it. Like, he knows what you're thinking already. Just like, just come ask. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't ask, like, you'll never know. You know, like, I'll keep trying to, like, you know, slip you the answer. But if, like, you're not even looking for it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you have to seek.
Some people are just scared to get the answers.
Oh.
I'm just saying. Like, yeah, some people have questions and they're just like, actually, I don't want to answer that because I don't want to commit to that.
Count the cost. Like we talked about earlier, bro. Like, man, okay, we'll get into that. Like, I've talked to quite a few people that they'll say that they know that there's power in prayer, right? They may not be praying to the same God that we necessarily believe in, but they believe that they pray, and they believe that the prayers are answered. They do believe there's some type of higher power out there that can hear them.
Right.
And can respond in some type of way. But I've asked the question so many times that, like, have you ever tried asking him? Like, they're like, okay, there's all of these different gods that people believe in. There's all of these different religions. Like, how can you possibly say that yours is true? Like, I asked. Like, I asked. I was looking for it. And that's the thing. Like, that's available to everybody.
Right.
But when I've asked people the question, why don't you ask him? Like, if you know that there's a higher being, you know that there's a higher power. The God that I know, the character that he has, he's not withholding himself from anyone. Mm-hmm. Like, he's always willing to reveal himself, but he's waiting for you to seek him.
Right.
And not everybody. There are a lot of people that are out there that are just waiting for somebody to spread the gospel to them, to share the gospel with them. Mm. But there are a lot of people that, like, they know that something's there. Mm. They know that there may be a God. But when I ask the question, okay, let's say that you ask God, who you are you, who is the one true and only God? Like, I know that you can hear me. You are powerful enough to do all of these things, create all of this. And I recognize that you do exist. When you ask that question, if he responds and he says, like, just as an example, this is my word. This is what I have said. This is the truth about me. Mm-hmm. Would you not then be accountable for whether or not you abide by what he said? A lot of people, I know that I've talked to a lot of people that love to sit in that position of, they don't really want to know. Mm-hmm. And I've asked why. I'm like, why haven't you asked? The response is usually, it's scary. I'm like, what's scary about it? And they're like, I don't know. But, like, I think the part that is scary is once you know that something is true, you are now obligated to actually live by that.
Right.
Once you know that, like, there is a God, if he says, I am real, this is me, this is what I've said, this is what you need to do. When it comes down to it, will you have any real reason as to why you couldn't have done that? Right. So a lot of people sit in that position of, I don't really want to know. So there's I can't remember what the verse is. I guess I got to get up on my biblical knowledge.
You get some Bible markers.
I do need some Bible markers. I'll be flipping through these pages. You know what? Whatever. I know it off the top of my head.
Why are you looking for it?
I got the message translation, the paraphrase for you. So there's a verse where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he asked them the question. He asked them something about John the Baptist. He asked them, he said, do you believe that John's, like, message, his gospel, was from man or from God?
Right.
So the Pharisees are stuck in this position where it says in there that they're struggling to answer because they're like, if we say that it was from man, then something. Oh, the people will revolt because they believe that John was a prophet from God.
Right.
If they say that it is a word from God, then Jesus is going to ask them, then why didn't you listen? So what was their response? they said, I don't know. Yeah, so I feel like a lot of people sit in that I don't know position. They genuinely just don't want to know. They don't want to know what the truth is. So I do know that there are people that stay in that position that really genuinely don't want to know. But I know that there's also people that just have questions that they need to be answered.
Right.
So that's something that I really want to cultivate in this podcast, giving people a space to be able to ask those questions, giving them a space to speak about the things that are getting in between them and having a relationship with God. So I guess as we wrap up, yeah, if you guys have any questions that you want answered, it could be about Christianity, theology, anything about God. We will likely be answering from a Christian perspective, because that is what we believe in. Yeah. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop some in the comments. Yeah, I feel like this was a good first episode.
Yeah, I think so.
Appreciate you coming today, James.
Yeah,
yeah, man. Day one.
Day one.
All right. We'll wrap it there.